Welcome to the Asian Art Museum. I'm here in front of our tea house. It is an actual building inside a building. We had it built in Japan, and once they had finished it, they took it apart, brought it here, and put it back together. Now, if you lived in Japan and you had a very large and wonderful garden, you might have a tea house like this inside it. And in it, it would have the rice paper windows and the mats on the floor, and it would have some beautiful art on the wall, or an ikebana, a flower arrangement, very artfully done. And then it would have a place like this to heat the tea, and a tea kettle, a large kettle, probably iron, that you would heat the water in to make a very special tea. And you'd invite your friends in for conversation and for a tea ceremony. If you've ever been to Japan, you may have seen a tanuki. A tanuki is a small animal about the size of a raccoon or a badger. And there's only one thing different about tanuki. They can change their shape into anything they want. Now, one day, an old peddler was walking down the road in a forested area between the farms. A peddler, a man who sells things that he carries on his back, pots and pans and cloth, and he carried everything in a bamboo basket on his back. And he was walking down the road, and he heard a sound in the forest, a sort of shrieking, and he put down his basket and ran into the forest to see what was wrong, and he found there a tanuki, a little animal caught in a trap, in a snare that some hunter had put there to catch small animals. Ah, Tanuki-chan, you should be more careful. Here, let me help you. And the peddler loosened the rope and let the tanuki free. Now, run on, little one, and be careful now. But the tanuki didn't run away. The tanuki just sat there and stared at him, and he would have sworn that it even bowed slightly to him. The peddler turned and walked back to the road, and it had been a long day, so he sat down next to his basket and rested for a while, just closing his eyes and soaking in the sounds of the forest. And he never saw that that tanuki walked quietly down behind him and climbed into his basket. And he never saw that tanuki change its shape from a small animal, from a small furry animal, into a tea kettle, the kind you would use in a tea ceremony. Eventually the peddler got up, picked up his basket, and walked on home. And when he got home, he put down his basket and sat down and began to rub his tired feet, and his wife came to greet him. And she looked at his basket. What is this? And she picked up the tea kettle and held it in her hands. Husband, where did you get this? What a beautiful tea kettle. Ah, the decoration, it is so fine. This must have cost a fortune. Where did you get the money for such a thing? Her husband just stared at her. I have never seen that before in my life. Where did you get it? Why, husband, I got it from your basket. That is impossible. And they continued long into the evening, discussing and puzzling. Where had this wonderful, strange object come from? Husband, it cannot just have fallen from the sky. Perhaps it did. Perhaps the forest spirits have sent it as a gift. Why would the forest spirits give such a fine thing to a humble couple like you and me? We are poor. What would we do for it with such a fine thing? You are right. Perhaps it was not meant for us. Perhaps they have sent it for the Morin temple up the road. Perhaps it is for the monks to use in their tea ceremonies. That is it, I'm sure. Quick, wrap it up, and I will take it there and give it to the priest. And so they wrapped the tea kettle in a cloth, and the peddler took it to the temple, and he presented it to the head monk at the temple. I have brought this for you, for use in the temple. And the head monk bowed deeply to the man. What a generous gift. You were a fine person to share this with us here at the temple. Thank you, we will use it well. And that next day, the head priest at the temple gathered many of the monks together for a tea ceremony. They gathered in the tea house at the temple, and he filled the kettle with water and put it on the fire. And then he turned back to his guests, and they all began to discuss an artwork on the wall made by one of his students. And they were busy looking at the work and talking about it when suddenly behind them there was a shriek, "Hi, hi, too hot, too hot!" And they turned around, and there the tea kettle had sprung a furry nose and a furry tail and 4 little feet, and it jumped off the fire and started running around the room. "Hi, hi, too hot, too hot!" The monks all jumped up. "Run for your lives!" And they ran out the door. Now, the students at the temple had heard all the commotion, and they came running with brooms and sticks. "Master, what is wrong? What has happened?" "Inside the tea kettle, it is enchanted. It turned into a badger and started running round and round the room." One of the students walked up gingerly toward the door and peered around the corner. Then he walked into the tea house and came back holding a cast iron tea kettle. "Master, it seems as if it has turned back into a tea kettle. But I tell you, it was a tanuki, and it ran around the room. It is a ghost. It is enchanted. Take it back to the peddler as quickly as you can." And they wrapped it up in the cloth, and one of the students took it back to the peddler and gave it back to the peddler and his wife. And when he told them the story of what had happened, the peddler and his wife did not know what to make of it. They put the tea kettle in the corner, for it was time to go to bed. But that night, the peddler thought he heard something, and he opened his eyes, and there, on the table next to his bed, was a tea kettle with a furry nose and whiskers and a furry tail and 4 little feet. Was this a dream? He pinched himself. No, he was wide awake, and there it was. The students told the truth. He pulled the sheet up over his head. Peddler-san, do not be afraid. I have not come to harm you." The peddler pulled the sheet back down. "Then why have you come, and who are you?" "I am the tanuki that you saved from the snare in the forest. And I am grateful, and I wish to help you. I have been puzzling and puzzling. How can I help this peddler and his wife? And I have come up with an idea." "Perhaps you mean no harm, but it is the middle of the night. Why now?" "I am so excited about this idea. Listen, and I will tell you." And it was a very good idea. If you had gone to the marketplace in the town nearby the next day, you would have seen the peddler and his wife. They had erected a tent, and they were standing by the door of the tent, and the peddler was calling out, come and see, the world's only living tea kettle. It will dance, it will sing, it will walk on a tightrope." And his wife was selling tickets, and people were coming into the tent. And those people who bought the tickets and went in were not disappointed, for they saw a tea kettle with a furry head and a tail and 4 little feet come out and bow to them and dance and sing. And then it got up on a tightrope, and holding a little umbrella over its head, it walked across the tightrope, and in the middle it spun around and did a little jig. and then walked the rest of the way across. It was amazing. All the people told their friends and their relatives and their neighbors about this marvelous thing, and soon people were flocking to the marketplace, and they couldn't buy enough tickets. The tent was always full day after day, and the tanuki performed, and the word spread farther and farther, and the money poured in until the peddler and his wife had more money than they knew what to do with, more money than they could spend in the rest of their life. And one day, the peddler noticed that the tanuki seemed to be getting a little tired. Once, when he was on the tightrope, he lost his balance and almost fell. And sometimes he walked with a little limp. And he said, "Tanuki-chan, I think you are wearing yourself out performing for our benefit. We have so much money. You have made us rich. Perhaps it is time for you to have a rest. If you could choose any place to be for the rest of your days, in any form, what would you choose?" At the temple. It was very nice at the temple. I could imagine myself sitting on a shelf, an iron tea kettle, listening to the monks and the students. But the priest would never allow it. He thinks I am a ghost. That is true. But you leave that to me. Tomorrow we will go and talk to him. And the next morning, the tanuki bowed to the peddler and his wife, and they bowed back to him and showered thanks on him for all that he had brought to them. And then he resumed his shape as a tea kettle, and they wrapped him in a cloth, and the peddler took him to the temple. And he sat down in front of the head priest and said, "Obo-san, I have brought you something. It looks very like the thing you brought me the last time, which did not turn out well. What is it?" "Obo-san, it is the same tea kettle, but let me tell you what has happened to me in the meantime. You have nothing to fear." And he told the monk the story of how the tea kettle had danced and sung and performed and made them rich. "And now, Obo-san, my tanuki, my tea kettle, wishes to spend the rest of his days quietly on a shelf here at the temple. And you see that he is a helpful and kind creature, helpful to me, and now he will be helpful to you. For if you will care for him and give him a home, I will give you half the fortune that he has earned for me and my wife, to support the temple and you and the other monks. I will give him a home if he has promised to remain as a tea kettle." "Yes, Obo-san, he has promised to remain quietly on a shelf. All I ask is that you give him space and show him the respect he deserves, and place on the shelf next to him each day one small piece of mochi. Because my tanuki-chan, he loves those sweet little rice cakes." And that is what happened. In fact, who knows? If you and I went to the Morin temple today, perhaps when we looked up on the shelf, we would see him there, sitting quietly on a shelf, and right next to him would be one small piece of mochi, the sweet rice cakes that children and tanuki love so much.